Hello everybody, it's me, Riffraff Hornhelm, and I'm back again with another presentation from the Dwarven Vault. And today, we have a monster review. Now, this is more of a general discussion about a type of creature or group of creatures that are within the original monster manual for use with basic Dungeons & Dragons and advanced Dungeons & Dragons, or what's typically called 1E today. Now, one of the things that's really prevalent in the monster manual, remember there's more than 350 monsters in there. The actual number of entries at the surface level is considerably less, but there's plenty of monster types in here that have various iterations and variants that expand that number considerably. But what if I were to tell you that nearly 70 of the original entries aren't anything special? That's true. They're mundane creatures. Everything from badgers and porcupines to sharks and octopi and pike and I mean on and on and on and on. And that doesn't include the dinosaurs. Now, most of these are not in any way magical. Some of them are a little bit more intelligent. And those tend to be ones that, well, for the most part, were influenced by literature. But there's nearly 70 creatures just on the surface. And of those 70, it's probably more like 110, 115 if you take all the variations of some of those creatures and use that to expand the offering. So have you really thought about that? Probably a third of the monsters in the monster manual are just, well, so to speak, regular folks. Even though they are not really special creatures, many of them are affected by being gigantic. They have gigantism. So you'll find things like a giant porcupine, or a giant owl, or a giant gar. They're still the basic creature, just on steroids. At the same time, you also find plenty of regular creatures like rats or spiders. I mean, take the phase spider out of it, and all of those variations are plausible. The thing you have to remember is back in the day when the Monster Manual was created and the literature on which Dungeons and Dragons was so heavily based or so heavily influenced by, even Tolkien and so forth, most of the critters that are around you are just everyday critters. And yes, they can provide their own adventure or encounter based on what you run into under what circumstances and how many of them there are. But have you ever really thought about it? If you're ever inclined as a DM to set up an area that has no magic, you already have a very large selection of things you can choose from. The creatures tend to get overlooked. Some of them are used for, say, comedic relief or because they really are appropriate for the area in which they're traveling. But they shouldn't be overlooked. They can really be a fun component in any adventure, especially if you're dealing with lower to mid-level characters. I mean, a stampede by a herd of buffalo is still a stampede by a herd of buffalo. It's not very easy to deal with. And it gives a challenge to your adventuring party to try and solve something that really is just a part of nature. So we're going to do a few of the creatures that make up these mundane or mundane that have been affected by gigantism. as an ongoing thing. There's no way I'm going to try and do all of these. Some of them, frankly, would not be necessarily very interesting, but they are an important part of world building and adventure building, especially as you're honing your character skills. So, this is up to your DM to give the appropriate level encounters. But with those appropriate level encounters, these are great creatures for sharpening those skills. And like I said, there's like a lot of them. So, really, in talking about this in general terms, of course, as dwarves, do we run into the mundane creatures that are in the monster manual? Well, yeah, of course we do. Not all of them, actually, a fairly limited number of them, but it still happens because they are what exist out on the surface world in nature. Some of them get down into the tunnels and whatnot, but not many. And of course, if you're running into these kind of creatures, you're going to have some encounters, some good, some bad. That it's once again part of nature. But yes, we do run into them on rare occasions. And of course, talking to the greater Hornhelm community, the first thing you have to get everybody to do is kind of stop for a second and say, "Oh yeah, you're right. There is regular stuff in there," and ask them about what kind of encounters they had that were memorable on that side. And surprisingly enough, there was quite a few memorable things that had happened on that side. Sometimes because of the, I guess, arrogance of the player who was used to much more difficult things and didn't really realize it would hurt that much to get run over by a bull or something like that. But for the most part, they were very smaller encounters, tended to be more lighthearted. From a DM standpoint, the individual value of these varies quite a bit. But most of them, I would say, are on a scale of 1 to 10, are probably in the range of 1 or 2, with a few of them being greater, things like a giant squid or a giant octopus, a giant slug. Those could be some pretty daunting encounters that definitely would rank higher up the scale. But all in all, they're not going to be the most difficult encounters. They're the easiest ones to create. And they're ones where your characters, for the most part, should have some confidence about the solutions that they have for dealing with it. They haven't had to learn about any strange magical creatures or anything that's outside the world of the ordinary. So these work very well for introducing a new player to the game. So that, my friends, is the general discussion about the mundane monsters in the Monster Manual. We hope you found this interesting, informative, educational, all that kind of good stuff. If you did, please be so kind as to leave us a like. Consider subscribing if you haven't. Share a comment. Share with your friends. But by all means, come back and see us again real soon. We thank you so much for your very kind support. Take care, everyone. And remember, dwarves rock!